Education for Upward Mobility. I'm Amy Treat, and this is Bookmarks. Hello and welcome to Bookmarks. I'm your host, Amy Treat. The United States government spends billions of dollars every year at the federal, state, and local levels on education. Yet the return on that investment is questionable. Test scores have flatlined, and social problems such as poverty and racial disparities seem intractable. But a new book, Education for Upward Mobility, edited by Michael Petrelli, takes a wider perspective and discusses ways the United States education system could be revamped to better serve the country. Mr. Petrilli joins us today. He is president of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, research fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, and executive editor of Education Next. He is the author of The Diverse Schools Dilemma and helped to create the United States Department of Education's Office of Innovation and Improvement. He serves on the advisory board of the Association of American Educators, MDRC, and the Texas Institute for Education Reform. And joining us to critique the book is Dr. Iris C. Rotberg, research professor of education policy at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at the George Washington University. She was formerly a program director at the National Science Foundation, senior social scientist at the RAND Corporation, assistant director at the National Institute of Education, and deputy director of the Comprehensive Study of Compensatory Education conducted for Congress by the National Institute of Education. She has published numerous works in the field of education, research, and policy. Thank you both for joining us. So, Michael Petrelli, could you give us, in a nutshell, the main thesis of your book?
Sure, and thanks for having me, Amy.
Yes.
So this book is about a problem that we all know about too well in this country, which is that we have this rising income inequality and lagging upward mobility. That unfortunately, even here in America, where we have this idea of ourselves as not of having a classless society, of having children be able to grow up to do and be anything, we have a situation where a lot of low-income children born today are likely to grow up to be low-income themselves. And there's been much discussion about what we can do in social policy and in our society to stop that feels un-American to us. We want to help all kids have a chance to make it to the middle class and beyond. So what we do in this book is to ask, what can our schools do to help with that cause? They certainly can't do it all, but are schools doing everything that they can do to help low-income kids make it into the middle class? And there's a lot in the book, but really it comes down to three main arguments here. Number one, we've got to do a much better job getting low-income kids to and through four-year college degrees. That still, college is a great way to catapult people into the middle class. It's a great way to open those doors for opportunity. The second, though, is that we've got to expand our focus in education reform beyond just college as traditionally defined, but also consider getting kids to and through technical degrees. 2-year college degrees, 1-year certificates in fields like healthcare and IT and on, that you don't have to get a 4-year college degree in order to get a middle-class job in this country. In fact, there's a lot of middle-skill jobs available for people with technical skills, and our schools need to do a much better job making that happen. And finally, we need to do a better job helping students prepare for the so-called success sequence. This is based on findings from the Brookings Institution that says, look, in America, if you do 3 things, you won't be poor. And that's graduate from high school, work full-time, and wait until you are 21 and ideally married until you start having children. And really the waiting part is the most important thing. And so addressing issues like continuing to reduce teenage pregnancy, really to make sure that, that everybody is waiting until they're ready to have finished their education, have gotten a foothold in the labor market before they start to a family, that is going to give all kids, including low-income kids, a much better shot at closing these gaps in this country and finally stirring the upward mobility that we feel like we've lost.
And Iris Rotberg, what is your critique of the book?
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Mike has mentioned, both in the book and in his remarks here, that there is the critical problem of poverty, and that a lot of the evidence that he provides in the book, particularly the dramatic underrepresentation of low-income and minority children in four-year colleges, is absolutely correct, and he links that to problems of poverty. Mm-hmm. My take from this and from all the other data on this link is that we're not going to make a major impact on education quality unless we first address the problems of poverty. But my second issue is that in the meanwhile, we have to make very sure that our education reforms and proposed reforms do not make the matters worse. In other words, do not actually increase the gap between low-income and minority children and the rest of the population. And it's with that thought in mind that most of my remarks evolve. So my first concern is that the proposal would track children and that it would have the unintended consequences of increasing the gap. There's little doubt that most of the children who end up in that track, in the apprenticeship track, would come from low-income and minority families. And I'm reminded here of a comment by a British colleague, Alison Wolfe, who said vocational education is a great idea for other people's children. So I think the result would be that it would be mostly low-income and minority children. My concern is exacerbated by the fact that the tracking would start quite early. Students would begin the apprenticeship programs according to the proposal in 9th grade, but in fact, to begin in 9th grade, you have to decide in 8th grade when the children are typically 13 years old. I think it's quite young. It's getting, although not quite there, uncomfortably close to Germany's early tracking system, which has been shown to result in one of the highest gaps based on socioeconomic status between low-income and higher-income children in terms of educational achievement. My other concern is that I think the proposal pays little attention to the severe problems in predicting what jobs will be available and what the job requirements could be in several years down the line. So if children are starting in 9th grade, what happens 5 years later when they enter the job market? As we all know, the job market is changing dramatically. A lot of the changes are unpredictable. Skills that were valuable 1 year and might be valuable to a company in that year are not valuable several years later. How is this predicted? And I think this could be a severe problem. I also think that the proposal makes several unsubstantiated assumptions where have to question whether this is feasible. For example, It assumes that there will be businesses and industries all over the country. There are 14,000 school districts that will be ready and willing and able to offer apprenticeship programs, productive programs, programs that will have long-term benefits, and that they will be willing to spend the enormous amount of time required to do this, and also the costs that they will incur to do it. So that's one important assumption. Another assumption is that they will be training children in something that will be productive to them years down the line. Another assumption is that these programs, these apprenticeship programs, will somehow avoid the results of our earlier vocational education in this country, which I know you have said in the book, Mike, was a failure. Yet this is another iteration of it. It has a new name. There's more emphasis on apprenticeships. But are we sure that it will avoid those problems? And finally, will the jobs exist in a wide range of industries and businesses throughout the country, and do we know where they'll exist several years from now, so that the children that have graduated from these programs will in fact be able to find jobs? So
Well, let's let
these are my concerns.
Michael respond to what you're saying with your critique.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments. First of all, let's remember that we are not having much success with our current strategy. In fact, it is failing at huge proportions. Let's imagine our focus was only on getting kids through 2 and through 4-year college degrees, right? As a country as a whole, we're only getting about 1/3 of our students through 4-year degrees. For low-income kids, it's more like 9 or 10%. What is happening for most young people in America, and especially young people coming from disadvantage, is that we now tell them, you know, we're going to put you through, quote, college prep courses in high school, though in reality, many of those courses are watered down, they're not very challenging, right? In part because the students themselves have not been prepared for them. They graduate from high school, if they graduate, and then we say go to college. And then what happens? They end up in remedial education, which is where they end up having to retake high school level courses, and overwhelmingly, they don't make it through. You know, something like 90% of low-income kids who start in remedial education on community college campuses will drop out, and they'll have nothing but debt and regret, right? And so now you're 19, 20 years old, you're a college dropout, you've got debt, you have no credential, you have no work experience, you know, you've got no work training, you've got nothing. And so my argument is, can we do better than that? Now remember that I started by saying absolutely we need to get many more low-income kids to and through those traditional 4-year college degrees. And we can talk about some ideas in the book for how to do that. But for this other huge group of kids that right now we're just shuffling through these high schools and getting these horrible results, can we do something better? And I do think that some of these higher quality career technical education programs that we have today are demonstrating results. Now, you know, Iris makes a great point. It used to be that we had these awful tracking systems where, you know, back in the 20th century, the system would decide if you were going to get to do college prep or you were going to, quote, work with your hands. And the system usually made that decision based on your race or based on your class, right? Or how much money was in your parents' bank account. Horrible, right? Absolutely don't want to go back to that.
No.
But the best programs we have today, including in Arlington, Virginia, and other places around the country, start in high school, high quality programs, challenging, and get kids on a path to college, just not 4-year colleges necessarily, but technical colleges and technical fields. Now the challenge is for young people to be ready to succeed in that in high school, they've got to come out of 8th grade doing well. You know, it doesn't work for kids who are 2 or 3 grade levels behind in reading and math or have behavioral problems. So it doesn't necessarily make our challenge any easier, especially in the earlier grades. We still need a huge sense of urgency to get kids ready. The point though is, can we then offer at least 2 choices, a traditional college prep pathway in high school or a rigorous, challenging career and technical education pathway in high school? I think that's going to get us much further where we want to go. And not just for poor kids. I mean, the book is about low-income kids, but the career and technical stuff is working very well for middle-class kids, too. And I think we are going to start to see more willingness for people to have their own children try these things when they see that this is now going into high-tech fields, it's going into areas of a lot of interesting work, and is still preparing them to be able to have those higher-order thinking skills, plus the cooperation, the teamwork, and the creativity, the innovation, that no matter what happens in our economy, those kinds of skills are going to be in demand.
Well, it's very true that the college education these days are so expensive that a lot of people, kids, and families are having issues with coming out and then not being able to get a job, and then they have this huge debt.
Right.
So this, I think, is something
and
that
again,
affects everyone.
and I'm not saying is the choice between college or career and technical education. My argument is it between nothing. That 90% of the poor kids today are ending up with Zippo, and can we do something better than that?
Yeah, definitely. Iris, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, certainly, Mike points to a very important problem. A lot of these children end up with nothing that's productive in terms of careers. But to assume that this will make the difference, I think, needs a lot more evidence. And we also need to consider whether by age, whether 13, if we are going to do it, 13, 14, is the right age to do it, whether it can be done later. Now, I know, Mike, in your book you have said that hasn't worked when you started 18. Question is whether it could work, because I think people pay very little attention to that. What happens at 17 and 18 if it's clear by that point, which it can't ever be at age 13, that the child is probably not going to go to a four-year college? Is there a lot more, and I think the answer is yes, that can be done in terms of both financial aid and counseling and some very organized programs of the type that you're talking about to happen several years later. I think that can be done without the risk of the early tracking, making decisions when the children are really very young. They don't know the job options. They know that a job with what would seem like a relatively small salary to an adult seems like a lot of money at that time. And so we also know how teachers and parents advise, and which ones will make sure their children are not in that track, and which teachers will decide based, as you said before, on the vocational education, based on race and income. People's psychology changes very slowly, and so there is always that risk.
Well, we need to make the change, obviously, and we need to have a dialogue and figure out what we can do so these kids can have a better education, have a better life.
Right.
All parents, all people deserve that. Would you like to respond to what she was saying?
Just quickly, there is growing evidence that these new career and technical education programs are getting very good results. The best evidence comes from an MDRC study of career academies. This is a kind of career and technical education where the students are within their regular comprehensive high school, but they have these sort of small schools of choice within them that have a focus on a particular area. So it could be healthcare professions or IT or something like that. And that the students going through these programs have been shown to get much better results in terms of graduation, in terms of labor market outcomes, so earning more, and this is fascinating, even marriage rates. That the young men in particular who went through these programs, many years later they could track them and see that they were more likely to be married and more likely to have custody of their children. So these are life-changing opportunities. Now, of course, it all depends on how we implement these programs and make sure they're high quality. And but I think what that demonstrates is that this has a lot of promise. And when I started writing this book, I come out of the education reform field and education policy. And this was a chance for me to learn a lot more about the broader anti-poverty world. It's interesting, the anti-poverty folks love career and technical education, partly because of that study. It's a gold standard study. It's one of the best social interventions we've got that's got the kind of evidence. And partly because they, when they think about this approach that we've had in education reform, this sort of college or bust mentality, they think we're crazy, because again, we know that now and for the foreseeable future, there are going to be plenty of good paying jobs that do not require that four-year college degree. And yet we know we're not preparing enough kids for those. So, this is a classic example of it's in my mind, again, some low-hanging fruit. You've got a bunch of kids shuffling through high school, many of them not doing well, many of them bored, many of them not very well engaged. Offer them a chance to do high quality something where it's more relevant, that's where they can be around they can be around adults, they can get work experiences, they can, while they're learning the academic content.
Okay, let's take some questions from our viewers. Let's see. This is from Terrence Dean. Do you think too many people are going to college, leading to degree inflation? Who would like to take that?
Yeah, no, I'll tackle
Okay.
that. First of all, the question, are too many people going to college? I would say this, too many people are going who are not prepared. We today have about 65 or 70% of all graduates, high school graduates, going straight into college. Okay, so young people out there have definitely been hearing us. We've been telling them, go to college, and they are responding. Okay, the problem is, that's up here, the percentage that are actually ready for college is, by most estimates, 40%. All right, so that means upwards of about 30% of America's high school graduates are going to college and not ready. This is why we see, especially at community colleges or some of the regional four-year colleges, huge percentage of the freshman class in these remedial education courses. I do think that there are some of those kids who are so far below the college-ready level would probably be better off doing something else, that they have such a low chance of actually making it through those remedial courses and getting a credential. That unfortunately, somebody should probably give them some advice that says, look, you're better off doing something else with your time than taking on this debt. The problem is, of course, there's not great options. I mean, in our economy, that means a low-wage job, and that means living awfully close to the poverty line, if not below it. So now, in terms of the inflation, the degree inflation, that's a possibility. But look, the percentage of kids graduating from college is only inching up. It's not like we are doubling the, I mean, we are making some progress in getting more kids to and through four-year degrees, but it's very slow. And I think most of the labor economists would say that that's not a huge problem anytime soon.
Is there something you want to add?
Yes, I think the question about inflation of college attendance, I think I would phrase the question as to the polarization of college attendance. And what has been happening is that over the years, the gap between the rich and the poor in terms of what types of colleges they attend has grown. So a generation, even a generation ago, but especially 2 generations ago, if you went to college, this was great. You could really make it. Now, if you go to college, it becomes much more important where you go. And given the costs of college, and not only the costs, but the entrance criteria, with the wealthy parents spending literally thousands and thousands of dollars on one SAT test score administration, which can raise the scores 200-300 points. And other kids, the ones that come from the most disadvantaged homes, having nothing. They just go in and take the test. So for lots of reasons, costs, the advantages the one group has over the other means that you're more and more in the elite colleges and the very competitive colleges having the rich go and the poor and increasingly the middle class, because a lot of the gap now in where people go is between the middle and upper classes. So I think in this sense, it's a serious problem. And I think there are some things, again, without attending to the problems of poverty, we can't solve the problem. I think there's some, not solutions, but at least remedies that the colleges could take to make it a little easier. One is abandoning the SAT, which is I think is a major contributor. Obviously costs, which is more difficult to do, is another. But yes, that's in terms, I don't think it's so, that too many people are going to college, because there's still huge advantages to going, and so who are the ones that are going to be left out? But it's more how the sorting is happening within the college system.
Okay, and now it's time for Answer This, where the reviewer gets to ask a question directly to the author.
Great.
Dr. Rotberg, go ahead.
Okay. One question that I would like to ask is, I'll combine two. One is whether you feel that the businesses and industries exist throughout the country that are willing and able to do this and to do it well, and whether they in fact are prepared to train or teach young children in a way that they are learning productive skills that will not become obsolete years down the line, whether they have the information to predict that, and whether they're just enough willing to do it. I know there's some excellent examples, but you know, that's a sprinkling throughout the country. What would happen on a large scale?
Yeah, you know, so I think Iris is referring to one of the proposals in the book, which is to look at apprenticeships. You know, countries in Europe in particular are famous for having these very robust apprenticeship programs for young people, say ages 16 to 20, Germany, Switzerland, some of the other countries there, that they have much more upward mobility than we do. And they are able to combine the academic with the career and technical education, and then this apprenticeship to get the on-the-job skills. And I think there is enthusiasm for doing more of that here. South Carolina's had some success with, not surprisingly, some of the German auto plants that are in the sort of Clemson area. And there's some other spots around the country. But I think that Iris is certainly correct that it is a hard lift to engage employers on something like that. I think some of the other models for technical education might be easier to scale, like the career academies, like having a high school work directly with a technical college, a community college that already has the, you know, say if you're talking about light manufacturing, they've already got the machinery or, you know, housing stuff, that you don't have to replicate all of that, but that can get teenagers to spend more time on those campuses is a big part of it too. I mean, I think there's, look, I don't think we know that there's one way, one model that's the right way to do this, but the point is, there's a lot of teenagers out there bored to death in high school and not getting success, you know, sticking it out, then going to college, then dropping out. It's not working.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Again, the book is Education for Upward Mobility, edited by Michael Petrilli. Thanks to Mr. Petrilli for joining us to discuss the book, and to Dr. Iris Rotberg of the George Washington University for her critique. And thanks for watching Bookmarks. I'm Amy Treat, and we'll see you next time.